On December 7, 1941, President Franklin Roosevelt declared that day a date which will live in infamy. The Japanese planned a surprise air raid on the Americans. Japanese chose to attack our United States naval base located at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. They called the plan Operation Z. The attack was extremely unexpected. The Americans were unprepared and caught off guard. The Japanese goal was to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet and cow the American government into seeking a negotiated peace that would leave Japan the dominant power in East Asia. In result to the Japanese plans and tactics, over 2,300 Americans were brutally killed. 160 planes and other aircraft were completely ravaged, while 150 were somewhat ruined. 12 ships were sunk during the battle, and 9 ships left unpaired. The U.S. announced war on Japan the day after the Japanese attacked. This was not a surprise to anyone. Before war was even declared, U.S. citizens saw this coming. In order for Japan to become the most dominant power in East Asia, they needed the natural resources to do so, including oil and aluminum. The Pearl Harbor attack plan was created by Isoroku Yamamoto. He was the commander-in-chief. All in just 90 minutes, the Japanese wreaked havoc, killing and wounding thousands, damaging and destroying nearly everything from ships and cruisers to aircraft and hospitals and homes. This attack was said to be meticulously planned and was conceived and executed just as the Japanese had hoped. The 40 torpedo bombers were split up into 4 groups and traveled together to an area north of Pearl Harbor. Once they arrived at the point north of Pearl Harbor, 16 torpedo bombers then split up into 2 groups that would separate and attack from the west. Then the 24 torpedo bombers, which were split into 2 groups as well, would attack from the east. The 40 torpedo bombers dispatched their attacks in less than 90 seconds. The Americans couldn't even react in time. Right after the torpedo bombers attacked, level bombers intruded and dropped nearly 2,000-pound bombs on the American ships. The Japanese were told to mainly focus on completely sinking and destroying the ships instead of just harming them. However, it was stressed upon that they not focus on trying to destroy a ship if it is already sinking. Doing this would be a waste and could be used on something else. Around an hour after the first attack, the Japanese were already planning another attack. These attackers had 550 bombs with them that didn't have one specific purpose. Minoru Genda, a military aviator, had double the torpedo bombers for each carrier than each ship. By doing so, Genda wanted to be assured that the carriers would never be recovered. The Japanese realized a lot could go wrong. Their whole plan was to be a surprise, and they questioned whether the Americans knew or not and would be ready to fight back. Commander Mitsuo Fushida led the first attackers. Fushida was told to fire once, which meant that the surprise was successful. If he fired twice, that had meant the Americans knew about the attack. As the Japanese were flying towards the northern shore a little after 7:30 a.m., they got caught up in the clouds and went west. Fushida just continued on and didn't bother trying to get back on the original route. Fushida fired once, commanding the troops that the surprise was accomplished. The troops did not start to get ready to attack. Therefore, Fushida had assumed that they didn't hear the first signal. He fired again. However, the dive bomber leader had flew past the torpedo bombers, thinking that Fushida fired twice, meaning the Americans knew about the plan all along, and the dive bombers attacked. The dive bombers and torpedo bombers were flying as fast as they could to drop bombs. Due to miscommunication with the firings, the bombers didn't get to the altitude they were supposed to. This decreased their accuracy with dropping the bombs. Also, due to the torpedo bombers going west instead of north, they attacked 5 minutes earlier. The first torpedo planes were hit by the battleship's fire because of this. During this attack, some Japanese lost their leaders and just fought on their own. There are very few men who fought in the attack of Pearl Harbor who are alive to this day. However, Jean Shou 96-year-old veteran from Severna Park, is proudly here today. Gene Cho says, "I heard what I thought was a dull explosion," I said. "What the hell was that?" He lay there. The power went out. Then a verbal order. "Report to battle stations." Cho said, "I am about the only one left." Most of Cho's shipmates died in battle. Cho was told to run ammunition to the anti-craft aircraft batteries. A torpedo hit the cruisers, and it began to flood. A diver went down and reported the hole was big enough to run a herd of elephants through it, Cho remembered. It was also stated that a bomb hit it as well, and somehow no men died, although many were wounded. Right across from the torpedoes and bomb hitting the harbor and the cruisers, more horrific events were occurring that would tribute to this day living in infamy. Directly across 450-acre Ford Island from the rally, the battleship USS Arizona was sunk with 1,177 souls lost. Cho remembers hearing it blow up. Experiencing what Cho saw was life-changing and traumatic for him. On February 1st, 1943, Japanese planes attacked again. 3 500-pound bombs hit us. The first one hit the bridge and killed most of the officers, he said. Smoke filled the fire room. I couldn't see. I felt something warm running down my leg. I looked. It was blood. He had been hit by a chunk of shrapnel still embedded in his hip. The ship was going down fast. I tried to find a life jacket off the sailors lying on the deck. No one was wearing one. It was either jump or stay on the ship. I jumped, said Cho. The Japanese bombed the destroyer, leaving the men with the choice of whether to stay on the ship as it sinks or to jump off and try to stay afloat and swim until you find help. Cho says how you are always tense and never get a good night's sleep, always worrying about what's going to happen next, or if you or the men next to you will end up dying in battle. Cho ended up marrying his nurse, and they were happily married for 60 years. Results of the Pearl Harbor attack ended in the beginning of war. Those living in America who were Japanese and Japanese American, which was around 110,000 people, were forced into living in relocation camps until war was over. Many important areas were not to be entered by people of some or any ethnicities at all. This was for security reasons due to spies trying to recollect any political or military information. Many citizens started to attack many Japanese-owned or Japanese-cultured business all around the world. Radio stations informed the world of the devastating blow the Americans took by the Japanese on December 7th. Everyone was worried beyond belief, wondering if their friends and loved ones were okay. Once World War II began, everyone in all the communities started to help out in every way possible. Women started to take over the jobs of men who were deployed into war. They worked in factories, and the women were fully capable of doing exactly what the men did. Girls and women also helped make first aid kits to send over to the doctors working on the field. With everyone's contributions, America started to feel like a whole, even though war was still being fought. December 7th, 1941, approximately 7:55 a.m., a date which will live in infamy. It was just a peaceful, calm morning. Men were sleeping like babies in their bunks. Some even hung over from the night before. Little did they know what was about to happen, until they woke up to the sounds of the Japanese aircraft overhead, dropping bombs and shooting at the Pearl Harbor U.S. Naval Base. Watching explosions blow up right in front of your eyes, spurring dusty black smoke into the air, while you are hurrying to get dressed and armed to attempt to fight back. Seeing the men to your left and right get left behind or killed instantly, and not being able to do anything because you must carry on and keep fighting. The scary thought of not knowing whether you would make it out of battle alive. Men as young as 16 being drafted to fight in war and leave school. Fathers having to leave their pregnant wives or children. The attack of the Japanese at Pearl Harbor is what brought all of this chaos about. December 7th, 1941, is a day which still lives on as we honor those who fought and will be in our